Lisa Martinez walked down the long hallway of the Galactic Military Academy. Her boots made soft clicking sounds on the metal floor. The walls were made of some kind of blue crystal that glowed softly. Through the windows, she could see 3 moons hanging in the purple sky of Kepler Prime. She had been teaching at the academy for only 2 weeks. Today would be her first day with the Advanced Combat Tactics class. Lisa felt nervous but tried not to show it. The other human instructors had warned her about this particular group of students. They were all from warrior species and could be difficult to handle. Lisa stopped in front of classroom 7 Delta and took a deep breath. She pressed her hand against the door scanner. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, 24 alien students sat at curved desks arranged in a semicircle. They all turned to look at her as she entered. The students were from different species across the galaxy. Lisa recognized most of them from her briefing materials. The Vorthak students looked like large lizards with sharp teeth and golden eyes. They wore dark blue uniforms with silver rank insignia. The Zelnari were insect-like creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the light. The Korthani looked like living crystals that changed color when they moved. There were also students from smaller species. The Meltar were small and furry with large ears. The Quindai were tall and thin with pale skin and no hair. Each species had their own section of the classroom, sitting with their own kind. Lisa walked to the front of the room and set her teaching materials on the instructor's desk. Behind her, a large holographic display screen covered the entire wall. The screen was currently showing the Academy symbol, a star surrounded by linked hands representing unity among species. She turned to face her students. Most of them were staring at her with curiosity. A few looked bored. One Vorthak student in the front row was clearly trying not to laugh. "Good morning," Lisa said. Her voice echoed slightly in the large room. "I am Lieutenant Commander Lisa Martinez. I will be your instructor for Advanced Combat Tactics this semester." A Zelnari student raised one of her 4 hands. "Instructor Martinez, we have heard that humans are new to the galactic community. What combat experience do you possess?" Lisa smiled. It was a fair question. Humans had only made contact with other species 15 years ago. Most of the students in this room belonged to civilizations that had been fighting wars for thousands of years. "That's a good question," Lisa replied. "The Academy's computer system will display my qualifications momentarily. But first, let me explain how this classroom works." She gestured toward the wall screen behind her. This display shows combat statistics for instructors as a form of introduction. It's a tradition from the old Vorthak military academies. The system reads data from your species' military databases and shows relevant achievements. The students nodded. They were familiar with this custom. In warrior cultures, it was important to establish dominance and respect early. Combat records were like credentials. Lisa pressed a button on her desk. Computer display instructor combat statistics. The screen flickered and changed. Text appeared. Accessing human military database. Please wait. The students leaned forward in their seats. Even the bored ones looked interested now. Lisa's species was still mysterious to most of them. Humans had joined the Galactic Coalition recently, and their military capabilities were largely unknown. The screen displayed Instructor Lisa Martinez, Human. Military Branch Colonial Defense Force, rank Lieutenant Commander. Years of service 12. A number appeared in large digits. Confirmed combat eliminations. Several students chuckled. The Vorthak in the front row grinned, showing his sharp teeth. One confirmed kill was nothing impressive for a senior instructor. Most of the alien students had higher numbers than that, but the screen kept updating. The number changed to 10, then 50, then 100. The chuckling stopped. The number kept climbing. 500, 1,000, 2,500. The students began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. These were serious numbers now. The kind of kill counts that took decades to achieve. At 5,000, the Zelnari student who had asked the question made a small clicking sound with her mandibles. This was her species' expression of surprise. The number kept rising. 10,000, 15,000, 25,000. The classroom became completely silent. The only sound was the soft humming of the air circulation system. At 35,000, a Korthani student's crystal body turned dark red, indicating fear or alarm. The Meltar students huddled closer together, their large ears flat against their heads. The number continued to climb. 40,000, 45,000, 47,000. At 47,832 confirmed eliminations, the screen suddenly froze. The numbers stopped updating. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a sound began to come from the speakers around the room. It started as a low rumble like distant thunder, but it grew louder and more complex. There were sharp cracks mixed with the rumbling. Whistling sounds joined the noise. And underneath it all, something that made every student in the room feel cold. Voices. Human voices, but not speaking normally. They were shouting, calling out words that the universal translators couldn't process properly. The sounds were harsh and urgent, filled with emotions that the alien students couldn't identify. The noise continued to grow louder. The Vorthak student in the front row, despite belonging to one of the galaxy's most feared warrior species, pushed his chair back from his desk. The Zelnari student's compound eyes darted around the room looking for an exit. The Korthani's crystal bodies had turned completely black. Lisa stood calmly at the front of the classroom, seemingly unaffected by the sounds. She watched her students' reactions with interest. This was not the first time she had seen this response. The Vorthak student finally found his voice. "Instructor Martinez," he said, his words shaking slightly. "Surely there has been an error. No individual could achieve such numbers and continue to function in civilized society." The sounds from the speakers began to fade slightly, but they continued playing. Lisa walked closer to her students. None of them moved to meet her halfway. "There is no error, Cadet Zexhai," she said, reading his name from her class roster. "But you're right that the number doesn't tell the whole story." She gestured toward the frozen screen. "This display counts every enemy combatant eliminated during my service in humanity's recent conflicts. The Third Corporate War, the Asteroid Belt Rebellion, and several smaller engagements." The room remained silent except for the strange sounds still coming from the speakers. "But before we discuss what those numbers mean," Lisa continued, "I think you should understand what you're hearing." She walked back to her desk and adjusted a control. The sounds became clearer, more defined. The students could now distinguish individual elements: explosions, weapon fire, machinery, and those disturbing human voices. "This," Lisa said, "is the sound of human warfare." The sound filled every corner of the classroom. Lisa watched as her students tried to understand what they were hearing. The alien cadets had all experienced combat before. They knew the sounds of battle from their own species. But this was different. The noise started with deep rumbling sounds like massive drums beating in the distance. Lisa knew this was artillery fire recorded from human battlefields. Over this came sharper sounds, quick cracks that repeated rapidly. These were human rifles and machine guns firing in sequence. But there were other sounds mixed in that confused the alien students. High whistling noises that grew louder and then exploded into chaos. The screaming of metal being torn apart. Electronic beeping and buzzing sounds that seemed to come from machines rather than living beings. And underneath everything else, the sounds that disturbed the students most. Human voices calling out in battle. The universal translators in the classroom tried to process the words but failed. The humans were speaking too quickly, using words that didn't exist in standard galactic databases. Cadet Thylex of the Zelnari species raised two of her forearms. Her compound eyes reflected the light from the holographic display as she moved. "Instructor Martinez, what language are the human voices speaking?" "Our translators cannot process the words," Lisa nodded. She had expected this question. "They're speaking English, one of our primary languages. But they're using military terminology and battlefield communication codes. Combat creates its own language." She walked over to the control panel and adjusted the audio. The sounds became more separated, allowing the students to hear individual elements more clearly. "What you're hearing is a compilation of audio from several human military engagements," Lisa explained. "The rumbling sounds are our artillery systems. Weapons that fire explosive projectiles over long distances. The sharp cracks are small arms fire from individual soldiers." A Vorthak student named Zorgak spoke up. His golden eyes were wide with confusion. "Instructor, in Vorthak warfare we face our enemies directly. We use honor blades and personal energy weapons. What you describe sounds like hiding from battle." Lisa smiled slightly. This was exactly the kind of thinking she needed to address. "That's an interesting perspective, Cadet Zorgak. In human warfare, we don't consider distance to be hiding. We consider it to be efficiency." She pressed another button on her control panel. The sounds changed to focus on one particular element: the whistling noises followed by massive explosions. "Those sounds are human orbital bombardment weapons," Lisa said. "We can eliminate enemy targets from ships positioned above the planet's atmosphere. A single human operator can destroy an entire enemy base without ever seeing it directly." The Korthani students turned bright blue, which indicated deep thought in their species. One of them, Cadet Veltar, changed to purple as she prepared to speak. "This seems impossible. How can one being eliminate so many enemies from such distance?" Lisa walked back to the center of the classroom. The sounds continued playing behind her, providing an ominous background to her words. "Humans develop differently than most species," she began. "While your civilizations focused on individual combat skills and personal honor, we focused on tools and coordination. We learned to make our weapons and machines extensions of ourselves." She gestured toward the frozen display screen showing her kill count. Every enemy elimination counted there involved human technology, amplifying human capabilities. "When I was a drone operator, I could control 12 different weapons platforms simultaneously. Each platform could engage multiple targets." The alien students looked confused. Their concept of warfare was based on direct confrontation between individuals or small groups. The idea that one person could control multiple weapons from a distance was foreign to them. A Meltar student named Kiprine spoke in a high, squeaky voice. "Instructor Martinez, how do humans maintain honor in battle if they do not face their enemies directly?" Lisa paused. This was a complex question that went to the heart of human military philosophy. "We define honor differently than your species do. For humans, honor comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves and ending conflicts as quickly as possible, with minimal casualties." She pressed another control, and the sounds shifted again. Now the students could hear the electronic beeping and buzzing more clearly. Mixed with these sounds were human voices speaking rapidly in calm professional tones. "What you're hearing now are human command and control systems," Lisa explained. "During battle, human commanders coordinate hundreds or thousands of individual units using electronic communication. Every soldier, every vehicle, every weapon system is connected to a central network." The Vorthak student Zexhai leaned forward. "You fight as a single organism like the Zelnari hive minds." "Not exactly," Lisa replied. "Humans maintain individual consciousness and decision-making ability, but we share information instantly across all units. When one human soldier identifies an enemy target, every other human in the battle knows about it immediately." She walked over to one of the Zelnari students. "Your species evolved as a true hive mind. You share thoughts naturally. Humans had to build technology to achieve something similar, but only for military operations." The sounds from the speakers began to change again. The harsh noise of weapons and explosions started to fade. In their place came different sounds. Human voices laughing, music playing, and what sounded like children talking. The alien students looked confused by this change. Why would sounds of peace and happiness be mixed with recordings of warfare? Lisa noticed their confusion. "Humans are unique among galactic species in one important way," she said. "We are excellent at making war, but we are even better at choosing not to make war." Cadet Thylex clicked her mandibles together in the Zelnari expression of confusion. "We do not understand, instructor. If humans are so capable of warfare, why would you choose peace?" Lisa walked back to her desk and leaned against it. The sounds of human civilian life continued playing softly in the background, a stark contrast to the military audio they had heard before. "Because," Lisa said, "the point of being good at warfare is to make sure you never have to use those skills. When potential enemies know what you're capable of, they usually choose to negotiate instead of fight." She gestured toward the still frozen display screen. "My kill count represents 12 years of human military service during our most violent period. But I haven't fired a weapon in anger for over 3 years now. Neither have most human military personnel." The alien students looked skeptical. In their cultures, warriors fought constantly to maintain their skills and honor. The idea of capable fighters choosing not to fight was almost incomprehensible. "I know this is difficult for you to understand," Lisa continued. "Your species developed warrior cultures where combat is a way of life. Humans developed warrior technology where combat is a last resort." The sounds from the speakers faded to almost nothing. Only a soft background hum remained, like the sound of a peaceful settlement on a quiet day. "Tomorrow we will begin learning human tactical doctrine," Lisa announced. "You will discover why the Galactic Coalition requested human instructors for all military academies." As the students began to pack their materials, Lisa added one final comment. And you will learn why species across the galaxy sleep more peacefully, knowing that humans are protecting them. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the classroom early. She wanted to prepare special materials for today's lesson. The display screen had been reset overnight, showing only the Academy symbol again. The strange sounds were gone, but she knew her students would not forget them easily. As the alien cadets filed into the room, Lisa noticed they were quieter than before. They took their seats without the usual chatter and joking that happened before class. Several of them glanced nervously at the display screen as if expecting her kill count to appear again. When everyone was seated, Lisa stood up and walked to the center of the room. "Yesterday you learned about human warfare through sound," she began. "Today I want to show you how human military tactics actually work." She pressed a button on her control panel. The large display screen came to life, showing a three-dimensional map of a solar system. There were several planets, asteroid belts, and space stations marked in different colors. "This is a recreation of the Kepler 442 system during the Third Corporate War," Lisa explained. Human colonial forces were defending against a much larger enemy fleet. The enemy had 3 times as many ships and 5 times as many soldiers. The alien students leaned forward to study the display. They could see the human forces marked in blue clustered around one small planet. The enemy forces were marked in red, approaching from multiple directions. Cadet Zexhai of the Vorthak raised his hand. "Instructor Martinez, how did the humans expect to win such a battle?" "In Vorthak tradition, we would gather our strongest warriors for a direct assault on the enemy center." Lisa smiled. "That's exactly what the enemy expected us to do. Watch what actually happened." She pressed another control and the display began to move like a recording of the actual battle. The red enemy ships moved toward the human planet in formation, clearly expecting a traditional space battle. But the blue human ships didn't move to meet them. Instead, they scattered in all directions, moving toward the asteroid belts and outer planets of the system. "The first principle of human warfare," Lisa said, "is that the enemy cannot defeat what they cannot find. Instead of grouping our forces for a big battle, we spread them out across the entire system." A Zelnari student named Kivara clicked her mandibles in confusion. "But this violates all military logic. Divided forces are weak forces. Any enemy can defeat small groups one by one." Lisa nodded. "That would be true if we were fighting like your species fight. But watch what happens next." On the display, the scattered human ships began to attack the enemy fleet from multiple directions simultaneously. But these weren't direct attacks. Small human vessels would appear, fire weapons, and then disappear again behind asteroids or planetary satellites. "Each human ship is connected to our command network," Lisa explained. "They share targeting information instantly. When one ship identifies an enemy target, every other human ship in the system knows about it immediately." The display showed something that amazed the alien students. The scattered human forces were fighting as if they were a single unit, even though they were spread across millions of kilometers of space. A Korthani student named Morgeth turned bright yellow, indicating excitement. "The humans are fighting like a single organism, but without losing individual initiative. This should not be possible." Lisa pressed another control and the display zoomed in on one section of the battle. The students could now see individual ships and weapons fire. "This is where human technology becomes important," Lisa said. "Each of those human ships has artificial intelligence systems that help with targeting and tactics. The human pilots make the decisions, but the computers handle the calculations." On screen, they watched a single human fighter craft engage 6 enemy ships simultaneously. The human pilot was firing at multiple targets while the computer systems tracked incoming enemy fire and plotted evasive maneuvers. 1. Human pilot with proper technology. Support can handle tasks that would require entire squadrons from other species, Lisa explained. "This is how I personally achieved such a high kill count. I wasn't fighting individual duels. I was coordinating automated weapon systems across multiple battlefields." The alien students watched in fascination as the battle unfolded. The human forces never engaged in direct, massive confrontations. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics, coordinated strikes, and what appeared to be weapons that could attack from impossible distances. Cadet Thylex spoke up. "Instructor Martinez, this seems like cowardly warfare. Where is the honor in hiding behind machines?" Lisa paused the display and turned to face her students directly. Let me ask you a question, Cadet Thylex. What is the purpose of warfare? The Zelnari student's compound eyes reflected the light as she considered the question. To defeat enemies and prove the strength of your people. That's one perspective, Lisa replied. But humans see warfare differently. For us, the purpose of warfare is to end the conflict as quickly as possible with the minimum number of casualties on both sides. She gestured toward the paused display. In this battle, traditional tactics would have resulted in massive losses for both sides. The enemy had superior numbers. A direct confrontation would have meant the destruction of the human colony, and probably the death of every human defender. Lisa pressed the control to resume the battle display. Instead, human tactics allowed us to win decisively while losing only 12 ships. The enemy lost over 200 vessels, but more importantly, the remaining enemy forces surrendered rather than continue fighting. A small Meltar student named Piplin raised her hand. Her large ears were twitching with nervousness. Instructor Martinez, what happened to the enemy soldiers who surrendered? They were treated according to human military protocols, Lisa answered. Medical care for the wounded, food and shelter for prisoners, and eventual repatriation to their homeworlds. Many of them later joined human-led peacekeeping forces. The alien students looked confused by this information. In most of their cultures, defeated enemies were either killed or enslaved. The concept of helping defeated enemies was foreign to them. Lisa noticed their confusion. This brings us to the second principle of human warfare, she said. We fight to win, but we also fight to create lasting peace. Destroying your enemies completely only creates new enemies among their relatives and allies. She pressed another control, and the display changed to show the same solar system 5 years after the battle. The red and blue markers were gone, replaced by green symbols indicating peaceful settlements and trade routes. Today, the Kepler 442 system is one of the most prosperous regions in human space, Lisa explained. Former enemies work alongside humans in mining operations, scientific research, and interstellar commerce. The descendants of the soldiers who fought in this battle are now business partners. Cadet Zorgak of the Vorthak looked skeptical. This seems impossible. How can humans trust former enemies not to attack again? Lisa smiled. Because we made sure they understood the consequences of attacking humans. Not just the military consequences, but the economic and social consequences as well. She changed the display to show economic data. Species that choose to fight humans lose access to human technology, human markets, and human protection. Species that choose to work with humans benefit from all three. The numbers on the screen showed dramatic differences in prosperity between human allies and human enemies. Species that had joined the human coalition had experienced massive improvements in technology, health care, and standard of living. This is the third principle of human warfare, Lisa continued. Make peace more profitable than war. When potential enemies understand that cooperation brings greater rewards than conquest, they usually choose cooperation. A Korthani student named Kelvar turned deep blue, indicating deep thought. Instructor Martinez, are you saying that humans use economics as a weapon? Not as a weapon, Lisa replied. As a tool for building lasting peace. Humans learned long ago that military victory without economic stability leads to future conflicts. She gestured toward her students. Every species represented in this classroom has benefited from human economic partnerships. Your homeworlds have access to human medical technology, communication systems, and manufacturing techniques. These benefits disappear if you choose to fight humans. The classroom fell silent as the students considered this information. They were beginning to understand that human warfare was only one part of a much larger system designed to maintain peace across the galaxy. Lisa walked back to her desk and leaned against it. Tomorrow we will run tactical simulations where you can practice human military doctrines. You will discover why these methods are so effective. As the students began to pack their materials, Lisa added, and you will understand why the Galactic Coalition chose humans to train the next generation of military officers. Lisa arrived at the classroom to find her students already seated and waiting. Word had spread throughout the academy about her kill count and the strange sounds from her first class. Several alien cadets from other classes had requested permission to observe today's lesson. She noticed that her regular students looked nervous but determined. They had spent the previous evening discussing what they had learned about human warfare. Lisa had heard from other instructors that the alien cadets were asking questions about human history and military philosophy. Today we will participate in a tactical simulation, Lisa announced. You will have the opportunity to command forces using traditional methods from your species, and then using human military doctrine. She activated the classroom's holographic system. The entire room transformed into a three-dimensional battlefield. The students found themselves standing on what appeared to be a large planet with cities, mountains, forests, and oceans stretching in all directions around them. This is the Battle of New Geneva, Lisa explained. It was one of the final engagements of the Asteroid Belt Rebellion. Human colonial forces had to defend a civilian population of 2 million people against enemy forces that outnumbered them 10-1. The simulation populated with military units. The students could see enemy forces marked in red approaching from multiple directions. The forces they would command were marked in blue and positioned around a large city near the coast of a continent. Cadet Zexhai studied the tactical situation. Instructor Martinez, this appears to be an impossible scenario. The enemy has overwhelming numerical superiority and multiple approach routes. Traditional defensive doctrine would require us to choose which civilians to abandon. Lisa nodded. That's exactly what human commanders thought when they first analyzed this situation. The enemy expected us to evacuate part of the civilian population and establish a defensive perimeter around the remainder. She gestured toward the simulation. I want each species group to work together and develop a defensive strategy using your traditional military methods. You have 30 minutes to plan your approach. The alien students immediately began organizing themselves by species. The Vorthak gathered in one corner, discussing honor-based tactics and glorious last stands. The Zelnari huddled together, their compound eyes reflecting light as they shared thoughts through their limited hive-mind connection. The Korthani changed colors rapidly as they debated different crystal-based communication strategies. Lisa watched as each group developed plans based on their cultural military traditions. The Vorthak wanted to meet the enemy in direct combat at predetermined strong points. The Zelnari planned to use swarm tactics with coordinated attacks by small units. The Korthani proposed using their natural camouflage abilities for ambush warfare. After 30 minutes, Lisa called for attention. Present your strategies to the class. The Vorthak group spoke first. Cadet Zorgak stepped forward. We propose establishing 3 defensive lines around the city. Our strongest warriors will hold the outer line to buy time for civilian evacuation. When each line falls, surviving defenders will retreat to the next position. Lisa activated the simulation to test their strategy. The holographic battle played out quickly. The Vorthak tactics resulted in heroic stands and individual acts of valor, but the sheer weight of enemy numbers overwhelmed each defensive line. The simulation ended with the city captured, and 60% of the civilian population killed or captured. Casualties: 180,000 defenders, 1.2 million civilians, Lisa announced. Time until defeat, 6 hours. The Vorthak students looked grim but unsurprised. In their culture, glorious defeat was often preferable to tactical retreat. The Zelnari group presented next. Cadet Thylek spoke for them. We propose using mobile strike forces to attack enemy supply lines, while maintaining flexible defensive positions around population centers. Our units will coordinate through shared tactical awareness. The simulation ran again. Zelnari tactics proved more effective than Vorthak methods. Their coordinated strikes disrupted enemy advances and caused significant casualties. However, the enemy's numerical advantage still proved decisive. Casualties: 95,000 defenders, 800,000 civilians, Lisa reported. Time until defeat: 14 hours. The results were better, but still resulted in massive civilian casualties and ultimate defeat. The Korthani group presented their strategy last. Cadet Veltar changed to a confident green color as she spoke. We propose using camouflage and deception to make the enemy think our forces are larger than they actually are. We will use hit-and-run tactics while gradually retreating to prepared positions. Their simulation showed improved results. Korthani deception tactics confused the enemy and slowed their advance significantly. However, the fundamental problem remained: insufficient forces to protect such a large civilian population. Casualties: 70,000 defenders, 650,000 civilians, Lisa announced. Time until defeat: 22 hours. The alien students looked frustrated. Even their best efforts resulted in catastrophic failure. The scenario seemed impossible to win. Lisa smiled and walked to the center of the simulation. Now let me show you how human commanders actually handled this situation. She reset the simulation to its starting position. But instead of traditional defensive positions, the human forces began moving in patterns that confused the alien students. The first thing human commanders did was reject the basic assumption of the scenario. Lisa explained. Instead of trying to defend a fixed position, they decided to eliminate the enemy's ability to attack. The alien students watched in amazement as human forces scattered across the entire continent. Some units moved toward the approaching enemy, but others headed in completely different directions. Humans don't think defensively, Lisa continued. We think in terms of eliminating threats at their source. On the simulation display, some human units attacked enemy supply bases hundreds of kilometers behind the main force. Other units used long-range weapons to target enemy command centers. Still others established communication networks that provided real-time intelligence on all enemy movements. Cadet Kivara clicked her mandibles in confusion. Instructor Martinez, these human units are moving away from the civilians they are supposed to protect. How can this be effective defense? Lisa pointed to the display where the enemy advance had begun to slow and fragment. Because humans understand that the best way to protect civilians is to prevent attacks from happening in the first place. The simulation showed human forces using orbital bombardment to destroy enemy staging areas. Drone swarms attacked enemy communications, leaving enemy units unable to coordinate their assault. Electronic warfare systems disrupted enemy navigation, causing some units to become lost or to attack each other by mistake. Human doctrine focuses on attacking enemy capabilities rather than enemy forces, Lisa explained. We target their ability to communicate, their ability to navigate, their ability to supply themselves, and their ability to coordinate attacks. The alien students watched as the massive enemy force began to collapse without ever reaching the city they were supposed to attack. Enemy units surrendered or retreated when they found themselves isolated and unable to contact their commanders. Final result, Lisa announced. Casualties 1,200 defenders, 300 civilians, 85,000 enemy forces. Time until enemy surrender, 18 hours. The alien students stared at the numbers in disbelief. The human approach had achieved victory while suffering minimal casualties on both sides. Cadet Morgeth of the Korthani turned bright orange, indicating extreme surprise. This seems like magic, not warfare. How can such tactics be possible? Lisa deactivated the simulation, and the classroom returned to normal. It's not magic. It's the result of humans thinking about warfare as a system, rather than as a series of individual battles. She walked over to her desk and picked up a small device. This is a human military communicator. It can coordinate with every other human device across multiple star systems simultaneously. When human forces engage an enemy, they're not fighting alone. They're fighting as part of a network that includes orbital platforms, automated defense systems, and command centers light years away. She showed the device to her students. Every human soldier has access to more computing power than most species use for their entire military forces. Every human weapon system can target enemies that human eyes have never seen, using information gathered by sensors across the galaxy. The alien students began to understand why the display screen had shown such an impossible kill count for Lisa. She hadn't been fighting as an individual. She had been a node in a vast network of human military technology. Small Meltar student named Ripton spoke up in her squeaky voice. Instructor Martinez, if humans are so powerful, why do you teach other species these methods? Wouldn't it be better to keep such knowledge secret? Lisa smiled and sat down on the edge of her desk. That brings us to the most important lesson about human warfare, she said. The strongest military force in the galaxy is not one that fights alone, but one that fights alongside trusted allies. She gestured toward her students. Every species in this room has capabilities that humans lack. Forthek individual courage, Zelnari coordination, Korthani stealth, Meltar technical skills, when combined. The final day of the week found Lisa's classroom packed with observers. Word about her teaching methods had spread throughout the academy. Students from other classes, junior instructors, and even some senior academy staff had requested permission to attend. The room buzzed with quiet conversations in a dozen different languages. Lisa stood at the front of the room waiting for silence. When she had everyone's attention, she activated the wall display. Instead of military simulations or combat statistics, the screen showed something unexpected, a peaceful star map with trade routes, communication networks, and diplomatic symbols. Today we conclude our introduction to human military doctrine, Lisa began. But first I want to tell you a story that your own governments haven't shared with you. The alien students leaned forward. Lisa's tone suggested she was about to reveal important classified information. 15 years ago, when humans first made contact with the Galactic Coalition, we were not invited to join as equals, Lisa continued. We were invited to join because your leaders were afraid of what would happen if we remained independent. She pressed a control, and the display changed to show human space as it existed before first contact. The alien students were surprised to see how extensive human territory already was. They had been taught that humans were a young species with limited spacefaring capabilities. By the time your scouts found us, humans had already colonized over 200 star systems, Lisa explained. We had built defensive networks, industrial complexes, and military forces that your intelligence services couldn't fully understand. Cadet Zexhai of the Vorthak raised his hand. Instructor Martinez, our history classes taught us that humans were primitive when first contact occurred. Are you saying this information was incorrect? Lisa smiled sadly. Not incorrect, just incomplete. Humans were primitive in some ways. We had no faster-than-light communication, no energy shields, no gravitic manipulation technology. But we had developed other capabilities that made us extremely dangerous. She changed the display to show human military assets as they existed at first contact. The alien students saw massive space-based weapons platforms, automated defense systems, and fleets of warships unlike anything in their own military traditions. Humans had spent centuries preparing for the possibility that we might encounter hostile alien species, Lisa continued. We built our military forces assuming that any aliens we met would be technologically superior and numerically superior. A Zelnari student named Kivlin clicked her mandibles nervously. What kind of preparations did humans make? Lisa pressed another control. The display showed human weapon systems that had been kept secret during the early years of human-alien contact. Kinetic bombardment satellites, automated manufacturing systems that could produce weapons faster than most species could deploy them, and communication networks that allowed instant coordination across hundreds of light years. Humans developed what we called asymmetric warfare capabilities, Lisa explained. We assumed that aliens would have better individual soldiers, better energy weapons, and better defensive technologies. So we built systems designed to bypass those advantages. The display showed footage from human military tests, weapons that could destroy entire fleets from impossible distances, manufacturing facilities that could build warships faster than most species could crew them, and defense networks that made entire star systems virtually impregnable. When Coalition scouts first observed human space, they realized that humanity had become a potential threat to the stability of the entire galaxy, Lisa continued. We had the technology and industrial capacity to fight the entire coalition simultaneously. The alien students looked shocked. They had been raised thinking of humans as recent additions to galactic civilization. The idea that humans had been a potential threat to their entire society was disturbing. Cadet Thylek spoke up. If humans were so powerful, why did you agree to join the coalition instead of conquering it? Lisa walked over to the center of the room. Because conquest was never our goal. Humans built military forces to protect ourselves, not to attack others. When coalition diplomats offered us partnership instead of demanding our surrender, we chose cooperation. She gestured toward the alien students. Your leaders made a wise choice. Instead of trying to destroy or contain humanity, they invited us to become part of the galactic community. This decision has benefited everyone. The display changed to show current galactic statistics, trade volumes, scientific discoveries, reduction in military conflicts, and improvement in living standards across all coalition species. Since humans joined the coalition, galaxy-wide military casualties have decreased by 94%, Lisa announced. Trade between species has increased by over 300%. Scientific advancement has accelerated dramatically. A Korthani student named Yelkava turned bright blue with excitement. Instructor Martinez, are you saying that human military power created galactic peace? Lisa nodded. Not just military power, but the right kind of military power used in the right way. Humans became the coalition's peacekeeping force because we had the capability to end conflicts quickly and the philosophy to do so with minimal casualties. She changed the display to show recent coalition military operations. In every case, human-led forces had ended conflicts rapidly while maintaining low casualty rates on all sides. Human military doctrine focuses on making war so costly for aggressors that they choose negotiation instead, Lisa explained. When potential troublemakers know that attacking coalition members means facing human military response, most of them choose to pursue their goals through diplomacy. The alien students were beginning to understand the true nature of human involvement in galactic affairs. Humans weren't just another member species. They were the muscle that made peaceful cooperation possible. Cadet Zorgak looked thoughtful. Instructor Martinez, you said earlier that humans are better at choosing not to fight than at fighting. Can you explain this more clearly? Lisa smiled. This was the question she had been hoping someone would ask. Humans learned something important from our own history, she began. The strongest military forces belong to civilizations that use them least. When everyone knows you can win any fight, most people choose not to fight you. She gestured toward her original kill count, which had reappeared on the display. Those numbers represent 12 years of human military service during our most violent period. But I haven't fired a weapon in combat for over 3 years. Neither have most human military personnel. The display showed current human military deployment. Despite having the most powerful forces in the galaxy, human soldiers were primarily engaged in disaster relief, exploration support, and peacekeeping operations. The ultimate goal of human military training is to make military action unnecessary, Lisa continued. We want potential enemies to understand the consequences of aggression so clearly that they choose cooperation instead. A small Meltar student named Tipren raised her hand. But Instructor Martinez, what happens if someone doesn't choose cooperation? What if they decide to fight anyway? Lisa's expression became serious. Then we end the conflict as quickly as possible with the minimum necessary force. Human military doctrine prioritizes rapid victory, followed by immediate humanitarian assistance. She showed the students footage from recent human military interventions. In every case, human forces had achieved decisive victory within hours or days, followed immediately by medical aid, infrastructure repair, and economic assistance for all affected populations. Humans fight to create lasting peace, Lisa explained. We don't just defeat enemies, we turn them into allies. Former adversaries become trading partners, scientific collaborators, and eventually friends. The classroom fell silent as the students absorbed this information. They were realizing that human military philosophy was unlike anything their own cultures had developed. Lisa walked back to her desk and leaned against it. This is why the coalition chose humans to train the next generation of military officers. Not because we're the best fighters, but because we understand that the best fight is the one that never happens. She gestured toward all the students in the room. Each of you will return to your homeworlds with knowledge of human military methods. But more importantly, you'll return with understanding of human military philosophy. You'll help your own species choose cooperation over conflict. As the week's lessons concluded, Lisa added one final thought. The classroom displayed my killer count at the beginning of this week. But I'm more proud of another number. The number of lives saved by conflicts that never happened because potential aggressors chose negotiation instead of war. The display screen changed one last time, showing a new statistic. Conflicts prevented through deterrence 847. Lives saved through diplomacy 450,000. Cadet Zexhai stood up slowly. Instructor Martinez, what is the highest achievement a human warrior can reach? Lisa smiled as she answered. The highest achievement any warrior can reach, Cadet, is to become so skilled at warfare that war itself becomes obsolete. The alien students began filing out of the classroom, but many paused to thank Lisa personally. They understood now why humans had been chosen as military instructors across the galaxy. Human military strength wasn't about